Do you want to take your first steps into creating dynamic websites with Elementor Pro, but you don't want to spend a boatload of cash on all of those shiny plugins you may think you need? Maybe you're just wanting to learn the basics and see if it's for you without breaking the bank. Well, in today's tutorial, I'm going to take you through a simple use case. We'll be creating a job listing section on the architect's website that I showed you how to build in a recent full build tutorial. If you haven't seen that and you'd like to take a look at it, I'll drop a link in the description below so you can check that out and get up to speed with what I'm talking about. For this tutorial, apart from the need for Elementor Pro, all of the other tools we'll be using are completely free and should help you get a long way down the road to building more dynamic WordPress websites. Now, if you're ready to get your learning cap on, grab your favorite drink and let's jump in and take a look at what we'll be building, and then we'll take a quick look at the tools we'll be using for this particular tutorial. So let's kick this off by taking a quick look at what we're actually going to create in this tutorial. So I'm back on my architect site and we've got a new section called positions, and this is just where you can take a look at any roles that may be available. So we're going to open up the positions option, and inside there you can see currently there are 3 different roles available. We can click and go through and take a look at the individual item. So you can see we can come back out and take a look at the next role. Everything is all set up and configured all nicely. We can filter these out or we can search. So if there are a big company with a lot of different roles available, then we could take a look at searching, or we could just come in and we can say we want to filter these based upon design, for example. And then we're only seeing the design orientated job roles. Now, the thing with this is a very simplistic way of setting things up, and we are using just free tools over and above what Elementor Pro gives us. So there are going to be some limitations. For example, with the searching and filtering, we are fairly limited to how we can set things up inside there. There's no Ajax involved, so in other words, we have to hit the submit button, and then we'll get redirected to a different page where it will filter information out. So you are working with some limitations. If you want the full fat version of this, then the pro version of 1 or 2 of these plugins may be something you'd want to look at. But we can still get a lot done with these free tools. So let's take a look at how we'd create this. So what tools are we going to be using? Well, first of all, we're using advanced custom fields. This is the free version, not the pro version. So there are, again, like I say, a couple of limitations inside there. We can't use things like repeater regions and so on, but we don't realistically need those to create a job listing. We've then got the option for custom post type UI, which allows us to create our custom post types and a taxonomy and so on. Dynamic conditions, if we want to set up some basic conditions. So for example, we may not have any job roles available at a given time. Well, we don't want an empty page. We want to put a message inside there to say there are no roles available currently. Elementor custom skin, because we want to be able to create our custom design for each individual job item. Elementor, obviously. Elementor Pro, now this is the only plugin you have to have paid for, and we need that because we want to work with the dynamic content with advanced custom fields and so on. So you do have to have Elementor Pro. Then we're going to use search and filter. Again, this is the free version, so it is fairly limited, but it should suffice for a lot of simple use cases. It's just a little bit more complex to get your head around what you need to do, but there's good documentation available for how to use it. Okay, so those are the tools we're going to be using. What we're going to do first of all is create the custom post type for our vacancies, and then we're going to create taxonomies so we can group those together by the department in which those vacancies are available. So let's come over to custom post type UI. First thing we're going to do is add our post type. So we'll click add post type. Now, if you've never used CPT UI and you're new to dynamic content and so on, I would highly recommend you take a look at the dedicated videos that will take you through how to use advanced custom fields from knowing nothing. And then the second part of that is how you use custom post type UI to create custom post types, taxonomies, and so on. Combine the 2 of those together. Totally free. Links in the description so you can check those out, get yourself up to speed, and then come back with a greater understanding of what it is we're actually going to be doing. So, with that out of the way, let's take a look. First of all, the post type slug. In other words, what's the name of this? So we're going to call this vacancies. Next up, we want the plural label, which again is going to be vacancies, and finally the singular, which is going to be vacancy. Okay, we could leave it at that point if we wanted to, but we're going to add a few extra little bits and pieces in. We're going to leave the additional labels out because we don't need to put anything in there. We can use the defaults. But if you wanted to change any of those, take a look through. They're easy to change and you can customize everything about this. What we want to do though is come down to the settings section, and we need to configure just a couple of things inside here. We want to make sure that this comes down and we say that we want to have an archive. So we're going to set that to true. Without choosing that, and this is one of those things that a lot of people that are new to working with custom post type UI miss out, is if you don't create this or you don't check this option to say it's true that it has an archive, when you come to try to create an archive template for, in this example, your vacancies, you won't be able to. Those options will not be available to you when you try to set the conditions inside Elementor Pro's theme builder. So bear that in mind if you have the problem. That'll be the reason why. We don't want to exclude it from the search, hierarchical. I tend to set this to true because it means that the interface is just a little bit nicer to work with. We're going to come down and make sure that we say everything else is okay inside there. You can set a menu position if you want to specify exactly where this goes in the structure of your navigation. I'm going to leave it as it is, I'm not too bothered. And you can, if you want, to use the dash icons to drop in an icon to replace the default ones that you'll see on the left hand side when we create this. Again, I'm not too worried about that side of things. Okay, so we're going to say add post type. And there we go. There's our vacancies on the left-hand side, and you can see it says all vacancies and add new. So we've created the vacancy post type. Next thing we need to do now is create the taxonomies that groups those together. Now, if you're new to taxonomies, but you've used WordPress before, all they really are is if you've created posts and you know you've got categories and you've got tags inside there, they're taxonomies. They're ways of grouping your post type information together. That's all they are. So don't be kind of put off and confused by the terminology that's being used. It's just ways of grouping things together. Okay, so what we're going to do is the taxonomy slug. We're going to call this department. And again, same again as we've done before. So we say department, and we'll just simply copy that, put it in there, and we'll drop an S in there so for the plural. Okay, so we've again done the same thing. We've given it the taxonomy slug, which is department, and we've given it the names for the labels. The only thing that's different now is we need to tell it what post type do we want to attach these custom taxonomies to. If we take a look on the bottom of there, you can see we now have some core features inside WordPress, posts, pages, media, and so on. But what we want is our custom post type, which is vacancies. So we're going to select that, and now we know that the department is going to be associated with vacancies. You can, if you want to, when you create taxonomies, you can group these together with multiple different post types. This example, we just want vacancies. Okay, so again, we've got all those labels we can change. We've got the settings options, so we want to set a few things up inside here. Hierarchical. Again, I set this up, I tend to sort of go with hierarchical for everything because it's just a nicer way of working. Even if you don't use that hierarchy, as in parent and child items, it just makes the whole process easier. You have tick boxes so you can visually see all the different sections you can link this through to, whereas if you leave it to non-hierarchical, you have to start typing things in, and I think it's a really bad UI kind of setup. So I'm going to set that to be true. We're going to come down a little bit lower. We'll say rewrite hierarchical, yes. Show admin column, we're going to say yes to that because it means that we'll see that when we take a look at the vacancies listings or the vacancy section, we'll see which department it's actually linked through to. And it's just a nice visual thing to see. Just makes it a little easier when you're working. And you'll see what I mean in a moment. Do we want to add this to the quick bulk? Yep, we do, just to make our lives a little easier. Okay, so that's all we want to set up inside there. We're just going to simply say add taxonomy. And now if we come out to our vacancies on the left-hand side, you'll see we now have departments. If we open that up, it's going to work in exactly the same as the categories and tags work inside the post section. There's no difference whatsoever. So let's create just a couple of departments. We're going to say we've got HR as a department, and we'll say add that. And we're going to just call this drafting and say okay to that. Okay, so we've created 2 new departments. You can create as many as you want to. It's no real problem there. Come to all vacancies. You can see we've got titles and date like you'd normally expect. We also have departments. So now when we create our job vacancies, we'll see which department they relate to. So it's just a nice visual aid that means we can quickly see exactly what department any particular vacancy is associated with. Just good for organization. Now that we've created our custom post type and our taxonomies, we're now ready to create the custom meta fields that are going to be associated with it. Now to do that, we're going to come over to the option for custom fields, and inside there we're going to say add new. Okay, so if you've never used ACF. Again, I've got tutorials on this that'll show you how to use it to get yourself up to speed with how it works. But what we're going to do is we're going to create the custom vacancy fields. We're going to call this vacancy fields. There we go. Before we take a look at actually adding in the fields we want to add, we want to set up the location and the rule for this to tell it where these new ACF fields are going to be working. In other words, what they're associated with. So post type is equal to, you want to change that from post, and we're going to come down and again choose vacancy. Okay, that's it. That's now, we'll link any of these custom fields that we create with that vacancy post type. It's as simple as that. Add our fields in. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to just say salary, because obviously everybody wants to know how much they're going to earn. We'll change this over to a number. Now you've also got some additional options in here. You can specify whether it's going to be required and placeholder text and things along those lines. So what I'm going to say is we're going to put in prepend, and we're just going to put the pound symbol in there just so people can see that it's working with a monetary value. And that's pretty much it. We're going to close that down. We're going to create another field now. So you say add another field, and we're going to just say hours per week. You can see it automatically creates the field name for us, and these are very important, so we're going to use those and reference those a little later. I'm going to change that again to be a number. Now, you can set it to a number if you want to work with whole numbers or partial numbers and so on. But if you want a bit more flexibility, you could also just set it to be text. It's entirely up to you. We're not going to search or filter against this. We are literally using this for information. So I'm going to leave it as text. So if I wanted to put something else in there, you know, I could have a range and so on. I could do that if I wanted to. But it's purely up to you. Okay, so we're just going to leave everything else on there. And then finally, we'll just simply drop in the start date. So people can say when they're going to start. So we say start date. And we're going to change our field type. We're going to set this to be a date picker. So you're going to click on there. And you can see now it comes up with a display format. So we can choose what format we want to display and how we want to return the values. Up to you how you want to set this up. I'm going to just choose this nice, simple, clean date way of working. And you can even create custom ones if you want to underneath. Everything else is perfectly fine. We'll leave that as it is. Okay, so we've now created the 3 custom fields that are associated with our current vacancies. Now it's worth noting at this point, if you're wondering why we've only got those 3 fields in there and nothing else, things like the name of the vacancy, the description, details, and so on, it's because when you create a custom post type, by default, the title, the description, and the featured image are automatically assigned to be used with that custom post type. You'll set that up through the CPT UI, and you can turn those on and off if you want to. So if you wanted to get rid of all those and use custom options, you could do it through ACF. If you're wondering why I haven't set anything else up like that. So now that everything is configured, let's just simply hit publish to make sure we save those changes, and we've now created our custom fields. Let's come over to our vacancy section and let's add our first vacancy to see how everything works. So you can see we're into the normal editor as part of Gutenberg. If we scroll down underneath there, you can see there's our 3 custom fields, and we've got the title, we've got the content area, and we've got the featured image all set up. If we open up the departments, you can see we've got drafting and we've got HR set up inside there. So everything is configured, ready for us to start adding content. So I'm going to go ahead, just fill out some content inside here. So you've got a couple of different vacancies, nothing that's any different to what you'd expect when you're configuring anything inside WordPress, when you're creating posts, pages, and so on. This works exactly the same. So I'm going to bore you by showing you how all that's done. So there we go. There's our 3 vacancies. As you can see, the department is listed. So it's a nice, easy way of seeing exactly where everybody is. Okay, so now that we've created everything, set everything up, we now need to start working with the pages, the templates, and so on to get this to look good. So we're going to use Elementor Custom Skin to create the individual loop item. And if you wonder what I'm talking about, let's come back over to our positions section. And each one of these entries, each one of these individual vacancy roles is a loop item. In other words, it's a template, and that loop will keep on repeating to show us all of the different vacancies inside the page that we're working with or the page we're looking at. So we need to create that layout. We're going to come back over into the dashboard. We're going to come over to the template section into Theme Builder, which is part of Elementor Pro. And because we've got Elementor Custom Skin installed, you can see we have a new tab called Loop. Open that up. And what we're going to do is we're going to create our first loop item. So for this, we're just going to simply add new, and we're just going to call this vacancy, create our template, and then we'll open up Elementor in exactly the same way as you normally would. I'm going to close this browser down, and we're now ready to start building out the template design. Now you can create this in any way that you want. We're just creating an individual entry. To do that, we're just going to drop in a very simple layout. So we're going to just choose a 2-column like so. We're going to drop in the image for the particular vacancy on the left-hand side, and then some details on the right-hand side. So now we can come back over to our widgets, open these widgets up, and you can see because we're working with a loop item, and loops are basically like a single post, we've got all the single post items. So things like the post title, the post excerpt, content, featured image, and so on. So we can use those in conjunction with some other widgets. So what we're going to do first of all is grab the featured image and drop that into the first section. We're going to change the size of this to the medium large because we don't want it to be too big, because we could potentially have a lot of images on the page. Come back out of that. We're going to go into post title and drag and drop that to the right hand column, and you can see that pulls in some data. Now if you don't see the relevant data for the particular loop that you're working with, you can come down to the little cog in the bottom left hand corner, open that up, choose the preview settings, and from there you can configure what you want to view inside here. So you can see if we open that up, we've got all the different types of custom post types and things like that. So posts and pages. You can choose vacancy, so choose that, and then we can just choose one of the vacancies. So let's just start typing in a name that I know is in there. Senior architect will do fine. We'll say apply preview, and then that'll update, and then that'll pull in the sample data from that specific post. So we've got the right data inside here now. So setting things up, styling it, doing all those kinds of good things makes more sense. Okay, next thing we want to do is just pull in some information. So we're going to say we're going to grab the post info, we're going to drag and drop that underneath the name of the role for this particular vacancy. Now this is just pulling in standard metadata for every single post. Author, date, time, and comments. But we don't have to use just those. We can customize this. We don't care about the author, it's not relevant. We don't care about the time, and we don't care about the comments. The date is quite useful though. Let's open that up. And inside there, you can see type is set to date, which is perfectly fine. The date format, we could change that to one of the other options. So let's just say we wanted this, just makes a bit more sense, a bit more user-friendly. Before, we're going to just put in posted. So we know that this means that this particular vacancy was posted on this date. Going to get rid of the icon. We don't want an icon, and we don't want to make this a link. So now we've got data in there, and we've customized that data a little bit. So that's pretty cool. However, we can go further. Let's copy this one. Going to open this up. We're going to change it from date. Click to open that up, and you can see the previous ones we had in here are still here. Author, date, time, and so on. But we have terms and we have custom. These are incredibly useful, especially if you want to work with more data types. So if we open up terms, for example, you can see taxonomy pops up. We can click on there, and you can see we've got categories, tags, and departments. Now I've got two departments because I was testing things out earlier, so you wouldn't see this normally. So we'll choose department, and you can see this now comes up and says drafting, because this is the department that's been associated with when we created this particular vacancy. So now we can change this posted from before, and we'll just say department. Okay, so we can leave the link off, we can leave the icon off. Obviously, if you wanted to use icons, you could do just that. So now we've used a term, which is a dynamic piece of information being pulled in. We can also do it again. Let's add another item in. We're going to change that from date, and we're going to choose custom this time. Now custom pops up, and we can now choose some custom data. So anywhere you see this little database tag, we can reference dynamic tags. Now if you're new to dynamic tags, again, I've got a video in the description below, so you can check that out. That'll take you through how dynamic tags work inside Elementor Pro. But for simplicity, let's just click on dynamic tags, and we're going to open up a ton of different options, and from there we're just going to choose what we want. So at the moment we've got posted, we've got department. The next thing we're going to do is pull in the number of hours they have to work. Scroll down, ACF field is available at the bottom because we've got advanced custom fields installed. Now click to open that up. That now opens up and tells you we want to put an ACF field in there, but you can see nothing has popped up because it doesn't know what ACF field to use. Let's click on the little wrench icon, change the key, and as you can see, any of the different custom fields that I've got set up are all listed inside here. So at the bottom, we've got vacancy fields, we've got salary, hours per week, and our start date. So let's just say we want to put in hours per week. Give it a second or so, and you can see that pops up. So now we can come into advanced, and we can just put hours per week in there, and we'll put a full colon and a space, and you can see hours per week pops up. So we've now configured that. We're going to take the link off there and we're going to get rid of anything else to do with that. We don't want any icons or anything inside there. So we've now created something just a little bit more unique, and we can carry on doing this. We've got one final one to do. To make our lives easier, we're going to simply duplicate this custom one. We're going to come down and we're going to just change the ACF field. So we're going to click on the little wrench icon, change it from hours per week, and we're going to drop in the start date. And change the advanced, and we're going to just say start date. As simple as that. We now have a nicely formatted start date listed inside there. So we've created custom metadata as well as using some basic standard metadata. We've now got a ton of extra information in there. It's all pretty cool, and as you can see, pretty simple and straightforward. So before we move on to the next bit, let's just tidy this up and make it look a little bit neater. So to come to our style section, and from there we can do things like set alignments and so on. We're going to drop in a little divider in between just because it looks a little nicer. We'll just make that just ever so slightly darker, just so you can see there's some separation there. And the text, we're going to come in and we're just going to set this to a particular color. Now you can configure this, or you could set most of this up inside your theme styles if you were using those options, which you should be. But for simplicity, I'm just showing you how you can do it quickly and easily directly inside the editor itself. So let's just set that to 400. Let's just make that 500. There we go. That stands out just a little bit better now. Next up on our list is to drop in a basic piece of information about what the job entails. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over to our widgets again. This time we're going to come in and we're going to grab a text editor. Drop that underneath. And all we can do is we can use the dynamic tags again. So I'm going to click on there. And when you install Elementor Custom Skin, you get a new option inside here for post summary. That's very, very useful. So we're going to click on post summary. That will grab 25 words from the actual main content of your particular post. In this example, our vacancy. We can configure that. All we need to do is come to the little wrench icon, click on there, and we can change that to something more. So let's just say we want to put 50 words inside there. You can see that now pulls in the extra data. So we're almost there. The last thing I want to do is just drop in the actual salary, because obviously everybody wants to know how much money they're going to earn. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over into our widgets again. We're going to grab a heading this time because it means that we can just add an extra level of importance to this. We're going to drag and drop that inside there. Position that over to the right hand side. I'm going to set this to something like H3 or H4. We're going to click, when we come to the content, on the dynamic tags option again. And from there, we're going to come down to our ACF fields again at the bottom. Click on the wrench icon, change the key, and we're going to come down to our salary. Come into advanced, and we're going to come into before, and we're going to drop in salary, space, and we're going to put the pound sign in there because we're working in the UK. Oops, don't want a full colon in there. Okay, so you can see that drops the salary information in, and obviously we can come in and we can style that any way we want. So I'm going to change the color of that to this gray color, and we're going to just quickly adjust the typography so it stands out, but it's not overpowering. There we go, that looks pretty good. And we'll set that to 500. There we go. Okay, so we've created the loop item. If you want to style this, or you want to do anything like, for example, I'm going to come in and click on the first column. We're going to set the vertical align for both of these to be middle, just to make sure that everything sits nice and neat and tidy. And we're going to click on this first section. We're going to come into the background, and we're going to set the background color to be just ever so slightly off-white. And we'll do the same then for the second column. Just means that everything just looks a little nicer, and we can see some form of separation between each individual job vacancy. Okay, so we've done what we needed to do. We're going to hit publish. Now, with the newer version of Elementor Custom Skin, you can add conditions in. We don't need to, because we're not going to set any kind of specific condition for this. All we're going to do is click Save and Close, and that's our loop item for our vacancy. Now, there's one problem we have. At the moment, we have no way of clicking this and going through to take a look at the actual vacancy itself. Thankfully, we can rectify that incredibly simply. Let's click on the image, and from there, we can just choose link. I'm going to change that to custom URL. Then we're going to click on the dynamic tags option again, and from there, we're going to say post URL. That will automatically set up the link through to the relevant page using whatever link structure we've got set up as part of Elementor. And we can do the same again with the title. So we can click on the title, and we can come over, you can see link is an option, so we can click on the dynamic tags, post URL, and now we've set this up so you can click on the image, or you could click on the title of the role and either of those will take you through to the relevant details page. So we'll hit update on there, save and close this with no condition, and that's our loop set up and finished. Now don't worry about the fact you can see the header and this vacancy loop and other bits and pieces on the page. That's going to be completely ignored because we've just basically set up the loop template, and all it cares about is this section in the middle of the page. So don't worry about that if you're thinking there's going to be a bit of a problem with that. Okay, so now that's been done, the next thing we need to do is create the page that's going to have this loop item on there with all the different vacancies for our particular business. So let's take a look at doing that next. So let's create the page that's going to display our vacancies. In the pages section, we're going to add a new page, and from there, we're just going to call this current vacancies. We'll publish that, and then we'll open up Elementor so we can start building things out. Okay, so with Elementor open, let's just quickly get rid of this title. So we're going to click to hide the title on there. And what we're going to do is we're going to come into our posts widget and drag and drop that onto our page. And you can see this now pulls in what it considers to be the right data, which in this example, it isn't right. It's just pulling in standard posts. To deal with that, we're going to come down to the bottom to the query section. We're going to open that up, and we're going to just change this source from posts, and we're going to set that to be vacancies. Then this will show all the current vacancies. But what you'll notice is it's using the sort of standard layout for this. We're not using that custom loop design we've just created. To deal with that, come back to layout. Under the skin section, we're going to change that to custom. Once we do that, this will now open up Elementor custom skin options. So you can see, select a default template, click on there, and we've created our vacancy loop. So we're going to click on vacancy loop, and that will then pull the design in. Now, as you can see, it looks a little bit rubbish at the moment, and that's because we've set this up to be a single column, and at the moment it's set up to show 3. So what we need to do is come down and set this to be 1 column, and there you go. Now everything is looking the way we expected it to. Posts per page, you can set that to whatever you want to. I would recommend we drop pagination in there just to make sure that if you have more than the maximum number that you set per page, we've got a way of moving through to find the next. So what we're going to do is come in and we're just going to say numbers and previous and next. Now we're not going to see anything at the moment because we only have 3 vacancies. Okay, so that's the first part of this done. We've pulled that data in. We can click through and we can take a look at those individual pages, which we'll take a look at create the template for that in a moment. So that's everything set up, ready. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on update on this page or save as, whatever you're going to do if it's a new page. So that's now created our vacancies. As you can see, current vacancies has automatically been added into our navigation. And let's come over to our test site. We'll refresh this and we'll take a look. There's our current vacancies. Click to go and take a look. And there you go. There's our vacancies. We've listed those. You could, if you wanted to, stop at this point and you basically created a nice vacancy listing section. We click and go in and you'll see we don't have all the data inside there because we haven't created that template. So let's take a look at dealing with that next, and then we'll come back and add in the search or the filtering section final. Okay, so let's come back over into the dashboard. We're going to come back out of this, exit our dashboard, and we're going to close back out of all of this, and we're going to come into our template section again. Come into Theme Builder. And from Theme Builder, we're now going to create the single template. Now, a single template, is, as its name suggests, allows you to create the layout you want to use for a single post type. In other words, when you click on one of these items, you go from an archive page to a single post page. What we need to do, click on single, and then we say add new. Then we're going to just choose the post type. So we're going to click on there and we need to choose vacancy. So what you should be seeing is that everything we're doing now, when we're creating templates and we're assigning all these things, we're assigning it to the custom post type that we set up right at the beginning of this entire video. So once you kind of get your head around that, when you're moving forward, it does make life a lot easier because everything is configured to go with that specific custom post type. That's part of the reason why I think creating custom post types as opposed to relying upon categories and tags and things like that as part of the normal default post type just makes organizing all your information just that much easier with WordPress. Okay, so with that out of the way, we're going to say vacancy and we're going to call this single vacancy template. Okay, so we'll create our template and that will then open up the browser where if we had any blocks or templates and things we wanted to use, we could use those, but we don't. We're going to close this down. Now you can see again, we've got pretty much like we did with the loop item, we've got all the single widgets on the left-hand side, which we can start to use, and we can very quickly create our layout. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in a single row column at the top. we're going to just simply come back onto our widgets and we're going to drop inside there the featured image. We don't need to do anything more than that. We don't need to tell it what the featured image is or anything, because it knows we're working with a single post, and it knows it's for the vacancies, so it knows what data to pull in. Set the image size to be full. Now at the moment it's just using quite a small image, but don't worry about that. I'm going to drop another section in, and we're just going to create a single row column again. We're going to add a little bit of space at the top of this and the bottom, so we're going to just set 50 pixels top, 50 pixels bottom, and a layout. We're going to set this to boxed, and we're going to set it up to be about 800 pixels wide, just because I think that looks quite tidy. Okay, so now we've got that basic info in there, we can now start dropping in the pieces of data that we want. So again, we want to put the post title in. We'll drag and drop that inside there. We'll set this to be centered. H1 is perfectly fine. Come back out of here, we're going to go in then, we're going to say we want to pull in post info. So we can do the same as we did before. We can just take out all the ones that are not relevant, and we can just come in and edit these to whatever we want. So we're going to say date and default format. We're going to change that to that nicer format, and we're going to just say posted on, colon, no icon. We don't want a link on there. So now, again, I'm not going to bore you by showing you this again because you've already seen it. It's just repeating the same thing again. We're just going to pull in exactly the same data as we did when we created the loop. So I'm going to pause the video, pull all that data in, and then we can take a look at moving on. Okay, so that's all that metadata put in there. Next up, we're going to come back over and we want to pull in the post content and drop that underneath. And finally, all we're going to do is we're going to drop in a little divider just to give us some separation between the top data and the bottom information. So we'll set that to about 30%, centered. We'll set that to dotted, and we'll come into style and we'll set that to pale gray. There we go. Okay, so that's basically that setup. If we hit publish, we then have to go through and set up where we want to use these. So you can see it said include vacancies and all. You can click on there and you can see you've got a ton of different filters, and this is where we can really get in and configure exactly where and when a template is going to be used and build up multiple conditions if you want to use the same template in various different use cases. What we want to do though is, like I say, this is for vacancies, so we're just going to say vacancies is fine. So I'm going to click on there and we'll say all vacancies. Save and close. And now we've created that single post template. So let's come back out to our current vacancies and let's take a look, for example, our junior architect. Click on there. That'll take us through now to our junior architect page. All the data's in place, everything is all styled and configured exactly how we want it to be. So that's that side of things done. But what we need to do now is come back in and configure and set up the searching and the filtering, because currently we have no way of actually filtering things out. And if you've got a lot of roles, that could be a little bit problematic. So let's take a look at a free plugin for searching and filtering. Now we're going to be using the free version of Search and Filter. There is a pro version and I've covered that in its own video, so if you want to take a look at that, you can check that out in the description below to see what the pro version brings to the table. But like I say, let's take a look at the Search and Filter free version. So we're going to open that up, and it's a pretty bare bones kind of setup, and it's going to rely upon you getting your head around and getting stuck into some simple short codes that you're going to use. There's an example you can see by here. Search and filter, and then the fields, for example, and there's a lot more you can do with this. So I would recommend taking a look at the documentation. I'm going to show you what I've done and I explain quickly how that works, but this is by no means a detailed tutorial on how to use the free version of Search and Filter. I would highly recommend you check out the documentation. It's not as complex as it first may seem. Now, if you move down the page, you'll see there's some examples of how to use the various different switches, the different taxonomies that we've got that we can use, the relevant information you can use to use that inside the shortcodes. So you've got everything you need here. It's just understanding how it works. So once you've kind of got everything in place, what we need to do then is drop this into our design. What we're going to do is we're going to come over into our pages section, all pages, and from there we're going to come into our current vacancies and we'll edit that with Elementor. We just need to make some space now to drop this in. So I'm going to create a new column. So I'm going to add a column. Just going to position this to about 20%, somewhere around there. That'll do. There we go. So we're going to come in and we're going to just do a search for short code. And we'll drag and drop that widget inside there. Now with this, what you need to do with this is simply just put the short code inside the relevant area, and then that'll add it in. So I'm going to drop my short code inside there, and you'll see that that now pulls in the relevant information. Now let me just show you quickly what's actually going on here. This is what I'm working with. So first of all, you've got the search and filter, which tells it that this is the relevant shortcode. Then we've got fields, types, and headings. This is just basically how you break things down. Fields, search, and department. Search tells it to use the search field. Department tells it to use the department custom post type that we created, or the taxonomy that we created for our custom post type, I should say. Then you've got types, you've got checkboxes. Now you can see there's a comma before checkbox. That's because search doesn't have what's called a switch. In other words, we don't need to put anything in there to tell it how we want to display this particular data type. A search is a search. There's only one way it can work, and that's a search field. Whereas the next option for the department could have different things. It could have a select, it could have radio boxes, it could have checkboxes. So all you need to do is tell it what format you want those particular filters to be displayed in. Then finally we have the headings, and again you can see that comma before it because the search doesn't need to have the word search above it because it already knows this search because it's inside the box itself. Department, however, makes a lot more sense because we wouldn't have a clue what drafting and HR meant if they were just popped in there. So once you kind of get your head around how this works and the different switches that you can use, it's not as complex as it first may seem. But if you're struggling, like I say, check out the documentation. It is pretty fully featured and should get you up to speed. Okay, so we've now dropped that in there so we can update this page and then we can take a look at this in action to make sure that everything works. Come back over, we'll refresh the page and you can see there's our filters. So we'll just say we want to choose drafting, for example. We'll hit submit and then that now takes us over and shows us the drafting options. But you'll notice that the design isn't the same as what we just had. We've just jumped over to what is effectively a default template for the theme that we're using, which in this example is the hello theme. So we're going to deal with that in a moment, but I'm going to come back out to the page we're working on because you can see this looks pretty awful on the right hand side. The spacing's all out, this all looks a bit weird. We need to deal with that first, and we need to do that through a little bit of custom CSS. So what we're going to do is come back out to our page. We're going to just select this particular widget, jump over to advanced, and at the bottom you can see we've got custom CSS. All we're going to do is drop in a little bit of CSS code. Drag and drop that into there, and you can see that now tidies things up. Let me quickly just explain what this code is doing. When you're working with Elementor, you'll see a lot of the times when you create custom CSS code, you'll see this selector. And that just basically triggers the container for that particular widget that you're working with. Saves you trying to find out what the name of it or the reference is to it. It's a very simple way. So as long as you put selector in there when you're creating this custom CSS that's applying to a specific widget, it targets it directly. Simple as that. So we've just said the selector, the unordered list, which is what's being used inside there, remove any padding from it. And then again, the selector and the list item, we want to set that to have no list style. We want to display it as a block, which means it'll force it to be on its own individual line. And then we just add a little bit of padding above and below of 5 pixels, nothing before and after. Nothing complex, and if you just want to take that, what I've done there, you can do just that. It's very simple, but a little bit of CSS code. So let's just update that page, and we've finished with that. We've now finished with everything on there. But we're going to make our lives just a little bit easier. We're going to click on the top section up here, this little blue bar, and we're going to right click on there and we're going to say copy. Now we've copied this entire block section. I'll show you why in a moment. Let's come back out of this, exit to our dashboard. And what we're going to do now is we're going to exit right out to our dashboard, back into our templates, back into our theme builder. And now we're going to create a custom archive that's going to replicate that vacancies page. Now you may be thinking to yourself, well, couldn't I have just created an archive page in the first place? And yes, you could have done. Instead of creating that vacancies page or that current vacancies, you could have created an archive page for it. But you may want to have different styling on the original initial page that people go to for the vacancies and not necessarily have the same styling on the vacancies archive page. It's up to you. You could create it in either way. There's no right or wrong way of doing it. There's just various different ways you could do it. So let's come into the archive section. And we're just going to call this add new, and we're going to say we want this to be vacancy archive. There we go. Create our template, and then once we've done that, we're going to close this down. We don't want to use any of these predefined ones. We're going to right click and we're just going to say paste. There you go, you just pasted the entire thing in there. So we just saved ourselves the job of having to go and do all this again. And there's one important step that we need to do right now, otherwise things are not going to work the way you expect them to. Currently, if we click to make sure that we've got the post widget active, come to the query section, you can see the source is still set to vacancies, which is what we set up right at the beginning when we created this particular original template. So what we need to do is change that from vacancies and set it to be current query. That's it. That's all we need to do. So once we've done that, we're going to come over to save and display our options. And from there, we're going to just change this now. Currently, it says all archives, which is what the default is. Click on there. We're going to scroll down to the bottom. There's our vacancies section. What we need to do is come in to choose departments, because all this is doing is going to display search results for the department when we filter it. So click on departments, leave it set to all, and then we're going to say save and close. So hopefully this is making sense to you. All it really means is that when we choose one of these options, it will go over to a new page. It'll be the archive page, and it's going to use the current query. In other words, it's going to look at the URL to see what's been filtered out based upon the department, and then it's going to show us the results from there. So let's come over to our test page. There's all our current vacancies. So let's just choose HR, which we know only has one result. So we'll click HR, hit submit, and there we go. There's our legal representative, which is in the HR department. We can click and go and take a look at the full information for that particular job role. Come back out of there, go to current vacancies. This time we'll try drafting, hit submit, and we see there's our 2 roles under drafting. Take a look at the senior architect, and again, there's everything laid out the way it should be. And that's it. Building dynamic websites with WordPress and Elementor Pro offers a lot of really exciting possibilities for getting your creative juices flowing. In this short guide, using free tools to help you take those first steps, and when you're ready to learn more, well, there's a full playlist in the description below with a ton of great tutorials that'll help you expand upon the fundamental skills we've just covered in this tutorial. As always, all of the applicable links for everything I've covered are in the description below. My name is Paul C. This has been WPTuts. Until next time, take care.